we're going to talk about the model of off season and why I say off season, as you likely know it, is dead. When most athletes think of off season, they default to one of two traditional models. Number one, a complete shutdown. And so they just turn their back on the sport. They go rogue, random. Or number two, it's time to build the base. Endless, foundational, low intensity training. At first glance, both of these sound logical. But here's why it's actually the fastest way to store your progress long term. Let's think about the primary thing that occurs here. Let's actually start with base miles. Here's the thing about base miles. This concept started back in the cycling days where athletes race many, many times a year, full of high intensity, and yes, doing a bunch of progressive base miles. And that model is applied to a regular time-starved athlete that is getting ready for events in which they typically race 2, 3, 4 times a year. And now suddenly we're supposed to, when the days are short, typically cold, and there's certainly way less daylight, often rain or snow in there, we are driven to go and add training hours at a boring, low-stress intensity. And it's all about this foundation. But the truth is, for a time-starved athlete, it doesn't integrate into life. Instead, in fact, trying to ram countless hours of training into an already busy life is going to add even more stress, even if we keep it very, very low. And so the concept of how your life is structured doesn't mesh with this concept of base building. Interestingly, in the summer months, where typically people tend to have maybe a little bit more time, certainly the days are longer and the weather tends to be warmer, that's a time where we do get to do a lot of base building time. And in fact, as we are doing an endurance sport, for time-starved athletes, you are able to get outside. It is more intuitive, and the events that we're training for demand quite a lot of low-intensity training anyway. And so I'm not suggesting that zone 1 and zone 2 training is not valuable. I'm also not suggesting that maintaining some zone 1 and zone 2 very easy training in the off season is not critical. It is. But this is not the time of the year where you flip the switch, you increase mileage, while for most athletes, you're going to be having to do that on the bike trainer. It doesn't make any sense, and it's not fun either. And so I would be patient on that. So that's not the first thing. Let's think about the second component that we talk about here, which is the old school view of just stopping training for weeks or months, at least structured training. This is a challenge. This is a problem. Way too many athletes think of off-season as a complete break. And what they don't realize is that stepping away entirely isn't recovery. What it is regression. You lose structure, that's really critical. You lose rhythm. You lose overall foundational fitness. In fact, the magic word of performance for any level of athlete is quite simply consistency. And if you think about consistency over the long arc of a year, how can you establish that if for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you're stepping away into complete randomness? It's structure that we need. It's maintenance of rhythm. It's ensuring that the musculoskeletal system doesn't regress. Your foundational fitness doesn't regress. And so we're going to show you a different way where you can take a genuine, and I mean this, a genuine mental and physical break while holding on to the key pillars that are going to accelerate your path forward. You see, we always think about that word consistency as the golden thread of progress. If you pull it out, the fabric unravels. On top of that, when you go random and rogue, it is inevitable that your supporting habits tend to regress as well. And that's for many athletes not realizing that the structure of training, the optimization of your planning of your weeks with all of your competing demands of life, of work, and everything else, when you just go random on one of them, you lose that framework. And so daily life actually becomes less productive for people. Then there is this fitness regression, and this is a huge thing. There's a loss of tissue readiness. So you think about your tendons, your muscles, your ligaments' ability to absorb training load. That decline, it regresses. And so you're starting to lose a little bit of readiness to absorb training in the upcoming months. You're actually losing motor programming, the way that your body moves. And you're actually declining even a little bit of confidence, because as you're getting further away from baseline, from what your medium place of starting point is, it's a longer hill to climb to get back up there. What ends up happening is athletes end up feeling stale, unmotivated, and when training does resume, really behind the curve. And this is where bad decision making takes place. Because when you're behind the curve, suddenly you look out in January at that April event and you're like, I've got to get going here. I've got to race. So what tends to happen? The number one mistake of training athletes, accelerating load in terms of intensity or total duration or a combination of both, accelerating load too quickly. That's how the system breaks. That's how we get sick. That's how we get musculoskeletal injuries, etc. And so this is a paradox. When you think about getting rest, turning your back actually ends up creating higher stress, greater inconsistency, and huge physiological regression. And so when we think about off season, and this is where I want your mindset shift to start to occur, off season is not an absence of training. In fact, it's a new phase of training. When we say rest, we don't mean random. And that is an absolutely key component. I'll say it again. When we say rest, it doesn't mean go random. And so we want to take some touch points of structured training that is much lighter. This is not a heavy training load, but it's a critical load to anchor your rhythm. And we're going to dive into this. But there are some bolts almost that keep the framework up. And then we're going to stay engaged and consistent, typically amplifying strength training, an infusion of a greater emphasis on technique and movement patterns. And then we're going to keep touch with our endurance activity. And when we do that, what is spawned is greater flexibility, physiological rest and rejuvenation, but not regression. And that is the catalyst for where, when you do turn the focus back on, when you do say in the new year, it's ready to rock and roll, let's go and do this, your body, your mind, your system is ready. And that is a huge point. In fact, I would say that across everything we talk about, when it comes to performance platforms that are broken, where people up level, they have breakout seasons, the one singular common thread that has occurred for every athlete that has gone from here to there, upskilled, up-leveled, breakthroughs, is always a fantastically executed off-season. That's it. And so I want you to start to think about off-season as a critical phase of training. And so if the old model is broken, what should off-season actually look like? Well, there's a truth. It's not hitting pause. It's about shifting your gears. It's your chance to recharge, yes, but you're also going to retool. You're going to build a platform. And I think that's a nice lens to look through here. An effective off-season is not about just going out and chasing miles. It's not about going rogue and random. That model is broken. We understand it. But it's a retool, and it's an opportunity to build a platform. That, if you do that, is going to make everything easier and more effective over the course of the coming year. Think about that. It's an investment in yourself. It's really, really good. And so, yeah, from the substance of it, I absolutely agree. You need recovery. You need downtime, physically and mentally. But recovery is active. It's not passive. And so just saying, well, you know what, I'm just going to turn my back on it. I'm going to go random. I'm going to hop into some classes. I'm going to do some training when I feel like it. I'm going to do whatever. That's a cliff that many athletes don't see climbing. What I'm doing today is grabbing you by the shoulders gently and saying, oh, don't fall off that cliff. Come over here. Because what intuitively sounds like freedom, it does erode your consistency. It kills your motivation. The return uphill is seismic. And so let's recharge, let's retool. Here's the thing you're not doing in off-season under the purple patch banner. you're not chasing fitness. At the last race of your season, as you cross your finish line, hopefully that was the fittest you were over the course of the whole year. That's where training performance meets race day potential, when you are fit. Okay. What we're not doing in this phase of training off season is looking to boost that fitness. Instead, you're building that platform. And we want to have plenty of capacity for what I call soul filling activities. And so, what I want you to shift here when you think about a productive off season is away from what's my output. So, what's my power? What's my pace? What heart rate can I hold for XYZ time, etc.? Shift it from output to input. What am I doing to retool, to create this foundation and platform of future excellence? So, what do I mean by that? Well, number one, technique. This is a critical and important time to improve your stroke mechanics if you do infuse swimming, your running form, your posture, your pedal efficiency. You start to understand how can you transfer the best return relative to how you are holding yourself in the water, on the run, on the bike, on the rowing ergometer, whatever your sport is. So technique is a great time. And when total training stress is low, because it is low in off season, and when we're not chasing output, we're focused on input, it's a great opportunity that you mentally and practically have time to focus on those things. So technical upgrades, great. That's a great journey. Number two, platform. We talked about that. Strength. This is a great opportunity where we're starting to develop the platform of durability in our muscles, our tendons, and our ligaments by really, really focusing on strength and then keeping it going throughout the next year. That is the moment where when you do dial it up and you do have an emphasis on future endurance development, your body is able to absorb and be able to adapt in the best way without the loss of that technique that you have worked so hard to improve. So durability, strength, power potential, all of the work that we're doing on muscles, tendons, and ligaments, this is the time to do it. And the third big area is really quite simply stuff that so often falls out of the back of the focus when the demands are high in training. And that's all of those supported habits. Sleep, really dialing in at this phase of the year. After all, the days are shorter, so it's really nice to stay in bed a little bit longer. Nutrition. This is the great time of the year that if you do want to shift your body composition for the positive and then dialing in habits now when training stress is low, the body's ready to do it. It's able to do it. Your rhythm of hydration. And in fact, I would say we talked about organizational structure of life and the frame of it. This is a time of year where you establish great organizational effectiveness, that you get very, very good at prioritization, planning, organizing your week, not just for work, not just for life, but these habits and training aspects that we think about. When we get that wrapped in, then you can grow with it. And so in many ways, the off season for any athlete of any level is your critical performance window, because it really is the things you have, quote, capacity to focus on things that you simply can't, no matter what your willpower is, no matter what your toughness is, no matter what your commitment is, you simply can't do it in the middle of the season.